Hello friends, my name is Leigh and I create videos about photography as an art and as a lifestyle. Today we're talking about the Nikon Z6III. It is one of the latest mirrorless bodies from Nikon. It's really good, no surprise there. In this video, Raymond and I will share our experiences with it and the photos that we captured with it. And yes, that's right, Raymond is making an appearance today. We'll discuss where the Z6III fits into the Z series and help you decide if it's the right body for you. But there's a swerve later that might save you some money. Before we get into it, please like this video and subscribe to the channel to help us out. You can even hit the bell to be notified when new videos go live. I've used all of the Z cameras. We currently own the Z7, Z9, Z30, and Z50 II. But we have owned a couple of others, including the original Z6. So Raymond and I were both comfortable with this Z6III as soon as I pulled it out of the box. Thank you to Nikon for the loaner, by the way. Every single Z body I have used is a winner. Even the originals are still winners, the Z6 and 7. I still have and use my Z7. The Z6 line sits alongside the Z7 line in the middle of the full frame pack. The Z5 is placed a little bit lower with lesser specifications overall, and the Z8 and the Z9 rest on top as the flagship bodies. Those have lots of megapixels, lots of speed, and lots of photo and video features, plus a hefty price tag. The ZF is also in the middle tier, but kind of off to the side with its vintage styling. And don't forget, there are a few APS-C bodies too. I'll discuss one of those in a few minutes. Taking a closer look at the Z6 and 7 lines, we'll have this latest Z6III and the Z7 II. No Mark III for that Z7 yet. The Z7 bodies are high megapixel beasts, and the Z6 bodies, this Z6III included, have lower pixel counts and a lower price, but also higher frame rate and more video features. It's a sweet spot for a lot of folks who want more features than the older and lower level Z5 has to offer, but don't need the massive megapixel count of the Z7 II and want to save a few dollars. Okay, let's dive into the specifics of the Z6III and the photos and videos that we've captured. The Z6III has a full frame sensor with 24.5 megapixels. There are three things that we're going to look at regarding the sensor: cropping ability, high ISO sensitivity, and dynamic range, or in other words, how much you can edit the image. 24.5 megapixels is plenty to have a bit of room for cropping if you so desire. These little killdeers were teetering around in the shallow water at a riparian preserve just after sunrise. We can crop into them. I'm cropping for this video, which is captured in 4K, so I'm being conservative here, but if I was posting this photo on social media, I could absolutely crop more. This is also helped by the fact that I was using a prime lens, which is wonderfully crisp. You'll see a video on my channel about that lens soon. And looking at high ISO performance in terms of noise and what the grain looks like. This heron was one of the first photos I captured when we arrived at the preserve, so the lighting was still pretty dim. The sun wasn't quite up yet. I had the camera set at a very high shutter speed so that I could use a higher ISO sensitivity than I really needed. In this case, we landed at ISO 12,800. The camera has a native ISO range of 100 to 64,000, so I could have set it much higher. I captured these photos in RAW, and this is the edited image with no noise reduction applied. But I then pressed the denoise button in Lightroom and got this. It looks amazing. So it's good to know what your images will look like at higher ISO sensitivities, which is quite good, but also how you can quickly and easily correct for noise in post-processing. And then I ended up keeping the shutter speed high throughout my visit and using auto ISO so that I could be as quick as possible when the birds were to take flight, but I was still capturing them here and there on the water and in the trees. And depending upon the conditions, whether they were in the shade or the sun, the ISO sensitivity went up and down. I didn't think twice about it, and as I was editing the images, I hit that denoise button when I felt that the noise detracted from the image. That brings us to autofocus. I most often shoot in single point autofocus, and No surprise, it performed beautifully in that case, but the autofocus detection is where we're seeing most improvements in all cameras these days. The Z6III can detect people, dogs, cats, birds, airplanes, cars, motorcycles, bicycles, and trains. Again, the Z6III did a great job. Was it as fast as my Z9 at recognizing and snapping into focus? No. If you want a super duper fast camera body with very fast frames per second and autofocus, you should look at the Z8 and the Z9. But for someone who likes to capture fast action sometimes, the Z6III is perfect. You can see with this duck, when I was using animal detection, that the eyeball was the point of focus. The bill, which is closer to us, is outside of the depth of field. In times when the eyeball wasn't detected, like with this starling perched in a saguaro, the bird itself was detected, so the focus is still on it rather than the portion of the saguaro that is closer to the camera. After this, Raymond used the Z6III for an outing to the zoo. He chose not to use animal detection. Instead, he chose single point autofocus, where he chose a spot and the camera focused there. We'll look at more of his photos as he chats with us about his experience, but one more thing about the Z6III and its sensor. I captured a handful of photos while on a short sunrise hike in Sedona, Arizona. I was actually capturing B-roll of using this camera backpack. Where I was positioned, I didn't have a favorable view of the sunrise, so I knew that I would be doing some editing because the foreground would be in shadow. So here are a few images before and after. I didn't do anything wild in post-processing here. There isn't any masking or anything, just a bit of editing with the sliders. I am unsurprised to see that the image files have plenty of room to adjust, even in difficult lighting situations. Okay, let's bring Raymond in and get his thoughts, including that swerve that I mentioned at the beginning of the video.
Leigh and I have used Nikon cameras for a long time, and the Nikon Z series since its inception, its very first day, so I knew what to expect. I knew the photos would be good. Here at the Desert Botanical Garden in Phoenix, I was proudly on B-roll duty for Leigh's review of the ZF. That video is already live, and you can see it at the link in the description of this video. In addition to the B-roll, I was also capturing my own photos and videos. The first thing that I noticed was how snappy and responsive the Z6III is, even in this very low light environment. Much more so than our OG Z7 or the Z6 that we had for a short time, but not as fast as the Z8 or Z9. Now, this isn't scientific, I'm going by feel here, but having used all of the Z cameras, I definitely noticed the speed of the camera and also the autofocus speed and the accuracy. As this camera is a step forward for the Z series, I expected nothing less. The Z6III is awesome. But what I keep thinking about is the Z52. We had both cameras on loan from Nikon at the same time, so each were on my mind constantly. At less than half the price, the Z52 is already more camera than many people are going to need. For people who aren't going to consider a smaller sensor, the Z52 isn't going to be on the radar. But for those who are open about sensor size, I would strongly recommend trying both cameras before making a decision. You might be pleasantly surprised by what the DX Z52 brings in 2025. I certainly was, and it's a very similar feature set to the Z6III with a different sensor. I will say that if you use the Z52 and the Z6III side by side, you will notice that the Z6III is slightly faster overall. Now, they are very fast cameras, one just modestly faster than the other. Our own decision to purchase the Z52 was easy, but keep in mind, we own a Z9 and a Z7, which are full-frame Nikon Z camera bodies. For us, the Z52 helps us build out our Z system. Previously, our Z30 filled this DX role for us. But without a viewfinder on the Z30, it's difficult for me to use. Leigh doesn't see that as much of an obstacle for her, but I just won't use the Z30. Now back to the Z6III, just as I feel like you can't go wrong with the Z52, you can also not go wrong with the Z6III as a full frame camera. They're both wonderful.
Thank you, Raymond. He brings up an interesting point about full frame versus APS-C and both being great options. All cameras today have amazing features, irrespective of sensor size or price. They all have amazing output. If you are looking for someone to nitpick the minutia of camera specifications, this isn't the place. But speaking in a practical sense, most photographers could pick up any camera on the market today and be completely happy. The Z6III is absolutely included in that. If you are looking at purchasing a new camera, especially if you are looking at a new brand, I always recommend trying them out in a store. If you have a certain feature or two that you really want, you'll be able to narrow down your choices, but then getting the camera into your hands to see how it fits and if the buttons and dials and menus make sense to you, that is where the decision can be made a lot easier. So who is this Z6III for? Well, only you can make that decision, but here are a few thoughts that I have. If you already own a Z6 or a Z50, this is a worthy update or upgrade. The updated autofocus algorithm, the extra card slot, the new video features are great. If you're looking to move from Nikon DSLRs to Nikon mirrorless, you're going to be comfortable with any of the Z cameras because the menu system and the terminology are all the same, but you will be blown away by the dynamic range of the new sensors, the clarity of the Z lenses, and the upgraded special features like bird detect autofocus. If you already purchased the Z6III, or if you've decided not to, let the rest of us know why in the comments below. I always like to hear your thoughts, and you might be helping someone else in the community. That's all I have for the Z6III for you today. Thank you again to Nikon for the loaner gear. I will link to my Nikon Z playlist in the description of this video if you would like to see more, along with links to the gear that we used in this video. And I also have a video coming soon about the Nikon 600mm f6.3 lens. She's a beauty. So make sure you're subscribed. Thank you for watching.